My Billionaire Mom. Chapter 1. Get up. A cool voice sounded in Jack Cannon's ears. The next sound, the quilt on him was completely lifted. Jack rubbed his eyes and looked at the woman. He sighed and felt a little uncomfortable. The beautiful woman in front of him was Yevette Jordan, who was 4 or 5 years older than Jack was. She was adopted by Jack's grandfather and was groomed to be his bride since young. But since his grandfather's death, her attitude toward Jack had become more and more terrible. "You useless piece of trash, your face even pisses me off." Yevette's beautiful face was full of disgust. Jack frowned and tried not to take Yevette's word to heart. "Let me tell you, I have done my best to support you. If you don't behave yourself, I will chase you out of this house." Jack put on his clothes and clenched his fists. "But you're my wife." "No, I'm not. It was your grandfather who forced me to marry you. Did he ever ask me if I agreed? If I had a choice, how could I marry a good-for-nothing like you?" Jack put on his clothes and stood in front of Yevette. "Wifi." "Don't call me Wifi. I will warn you for the last time. The money that you spend to eat and drink now is all mine. If you dare to call me Wifi again, I will let you die on the streets." Yevette snorted coldly and looked at Jack with disdain. "But I'm sure that trash like you won't be able to survive on the streets for long." Since grandpa left, such humiliation was no longer strange to Jack. His fragile self-esteem had been almost crushed by Yevette. Sometimes Jack even doubted whether he was really a piece of trash. "Hmm. Wife, Yevette, I don't have any money." Jack took a deep breath. He was just a freshman this year, and Yevette was not only a university lecturer, but also owned a company. He was a rich person. "Look at yourself. You look like a beggar. It's disgusting." Yevette looked at Jack disgustedly. Then she took out $200 from her bag and threw it on the ground. She turned around and left. Looking at the money on the ground, Jack clenched his fists. In the end, he didn't pick up the money on the ground. He walked out of the house with his remaining self-esteem. Yevette's BMW drove out of the garage, and Jack stood by the roadside and watched. He was in the same university as Yevette, so they were heading in the same direction. However, Yevette's car didn't stop and drove past Jack. "Get out of here and take the bus. A piece of trash doesn't deserve to ride my car." After saying that, Yevette stepped on the accelerator and left. Jack gritted his teeth and looked at the BMW that has disappeared at the end of the road. His eyes were slightly red. "Yevette, you have gone too far." He was penniless now. His lunch money these days was borrowed from his classmates, and today was the day for him to return the money. Unfortunately, the $200 were too burdensome, and he couldn't pick it up. When he arrived at school, his worst fears came true. As soon as he walked to the school gate, Jack happened to meet a student who lent money to him. Lara Jean was buying milk tea outside the school gate. When she saw Jack, who was in a state of loss, she reached out and said, "Jack, it's time to pay back the money, isn't it?" Jack wanted to bury himself out of shame. He scratched his hair and said with embarrassment, "Well, give me 1 more day. I will do part-time work. I will pay you back the money latest by tomorrow." "No, how long have you been delaying? You have to return the money to me today," Lara said coldly, and there was no room for negotiation in her tone. Jack sighed. "But I really don't have any money now." "You don't have money to ask your parents for it. Are you an orphan?" "You—" Jack clenched his fists tightly. For as long as he could remember, he had been living with his grandfather. He had never seen his parents before. However, being called an orphan by Lara made him feel even more uncomfortable. "You are really an orphan? Well, I give you an extension until this afternoon. But you give to pay me 400. If you don't pay me back, I will ask my boyfriend to bring someone to deal with you." Lara warned and left. Jack stood still in his tracks. He was extremely sad. He had enough of such humiliation. Just as Jack was thinking about what part-time job he was going to do, his phone rang. Jack looked at the caller ID and saw that it turned out to be a foreign number. He was afraid that it was probably a swindler. However, When he thought of the online recruitment of mercenaries in Syria, which has quite popular recently, offering $8,000 a day, he became interested again. Although he knew it could be a scam, if it was true, he would definitely go to Syria without hesitation. Hello, Jack greeted. Unexpectedly, a flurry of words in Mandarin from on the other end of the phone. Jack, I'm your mother. Jack was stunned. He first felt that he had been made fun of others. But then he felt extremely sad. How could he have a mother? Jackie, don't blame me. I had no choice but to go abroad these years. But now I can finally return home. I can try my best to make up for the lost time with you. I will transfer $5 million and you can use it first. If it is all spent, call me. The strange conversation ended in a wild atmosphere. As soon as he called ended, a message arrived. Your account with the ending number 0123 has been credited with $5 million. And the current balance is $5,000,083. Chang was dumbfounded. His mother, whom he had never seen before, actually gave him $5 million. He looked at the text message and counted the zeros, again and again, repeatedly confirming it more than a dozen times, and then went to the ATM to check if it was correct. He was ecstatic. That was 5 million. What more, it was his mysterious mother who casually gave him pocket money. Even Yevette, who was busy with her business, had less than $1 million, including her car and her savings. Jack giggled and walked to the campus. At this time, Yevette, who was going to the public building for class, said with disgust after seeing Jack, "Why aren't you in class but instead laughing here stupidly?" "I'm not going to class anymore." Jack stood where he was and watched Yevette quietly. Yevette felt a little strange. He seemed to see a confident look in Jack's eyes. Isn't he still the useless piece of trash? How dare he argue with her? Yevette was angry. How dare you talk back to me? If you have the guts, don't come to my house today. Jack was also tired of being treated coldly by Yevette. He was disdainful. I'm not going back. I will sleep elsewhere. Is this a joke? Now that I have $5 million, I don't need to look at Yevette's unhappy face anymore. Jack thought of himself. You, great. I would like to see how brave you are. From now on, if you dare to enter my house again, I will break your legs. Jack ignored Yevette and directly turned his back and left the school. Yevette stomped her feet angrily, but she couldn't do anything about it, so she turned around and went to class. Jack, who had left school, took a taxi to the real estate agency in the city center. With his sum of money, the first thing Jack wanted to do was to have his own house. After pushing the door open and entering the real estate agency, employees did not pay attention to Jack, who was dressed ordinary. This kind of person was either looked for a part-time job, begging for food, or type who wasn't interested in buying anything, but just trying to enjoy the air-conditioned room. Later, when the manager of the store came out of the office, those lazy employees hurried up and asked, "Sir, what do you need?" "To buy a house." "To buy a house?" Natalie Xavier's big eyes narrowed. She stared at Jack carefully for a long time. She had been a real estate agent for so long, but she had rarely misjudged someone. There may be 1 in 1,000 customers who would buy a house at less than 20 years old like Jack. But all of them wore branded suits and drove high-end sports cars. "Sir, for your information, the cheapest house in the city is around 12,000 per square meter. Are you sure you want to buy it?" Natalie didn't want to waste time on this kind of person, so her tone became impatient. Chapter number 2. Yes, the cheapest one is $12,000, which means that a house of 100 square meter cost about $1 million. Even the smallest apartment, those clothes $50,000 or $60,000. You must listen carefully, sir. Natalie Xavier was very dismissive of this kind of person who was overconfident and malicious delayed time. Well, Chakaran didn't finish his word. At this time, a pot-bellied man walked into the real estate agency. The gold necklace on his neck was thicker than his finger, and he looked like a rich man at first glance. Natalie immediately chose to leave Jack aside and greeted the man with a smile. It was totally different from the way she treated Jack. When Natalie saw the fat man, she immediately put on a happy smile. Sir, do you want to buy a house? Yes, I want to buy a house. Introduce some quality housing sources to me. Natalie smiled even more happily. Yes, yes. We have plenty of high quality rooms here for you with our high end service. Unlike some people who come to us even when they can't afford it. It's a waste of time. Natalie gave Jack a disdainful look as she spoke, implying and cursing him. Jack looked at Natalie's attitude and felt disheartened. Jack looked at Natalie's attitude and felt disheartened. He was used to being looked down upon. At the time, he didn't dare to say anything without money. But this time he had $5 million. How could he swallow such humiliation? Where's your manager? Call your manager over. Hearing Jack's word, Natalie sneered and said, do people like you still have the right to meet our manager? Don't make a fool of yourself here. Get out of here. Do you know that wasting 1 minute of our time will affect how much money we make? The manager walked over slowly at this time. As a service industry, it was a big taboo to be rude to guests. What's going on, Natalie? Natalie hurriedly explained, Manager, this broke idiot isn't trying to buy a house, but instead he is enjoying the air condition here. I will get him out of there immediately. The manager eyeballed Jack's clothes from top to bottom and saw that he was dressed in ordinary clothes. Indeed, as Natalie said, he didn't look like someone who could afford to buy a house. More importantly, he was too young to buy a house as looked at just 18 or 19 years old. No one would believe that he had the ability to. Jack didn't say anything. He stood up and walked to the agency next door. Can't afford a house? It seems that you are not the only real estate agency here. Natalie looked down on him. How is a poor person like you able to buy a house? I think you can't even afford a toilet. Some employees also laughed at him. He is afraid of making a fool of himself, so he found an excuse to run away quickly. He said he wanted to go to the next door, but he could possibly just be trying to take advantage of the air condition there too. Still pretending even when you were gone. Natalie sneered. They were familiar with the next door real estate agency, and they also knew whether they could sell it or not. After watching Jack leave, Natalie hurriedly ran to the ferry and smiled apologetically. I'm sorry, boss. Sorry to keep you waiting. The fatty shook his head and said, It's okay, it's okay. However, no matter how Natalie greeted him with a smile, the fatty never talked about money. In the end, Natalie's patience was exhausted and she even began to plead. At this moment, all the employees of the real estate agency looked outside. Under the respectful guidance of the staff next door, Jack got into the Mercedes Benz, which was especially used to look at the room. What was going on? Generally speaking, only people who bought a house could enter this car. Didn't the next door real estate agency see that this little rascal didn't have the ability to buy a house at all? The fatty saw that these people in the real estate agency were distracted, so he quickly sneaked out. Natalie turned around and looked at the customer, who had disappeared. She was so angry that she stomped her feet. She didn't expect that the fatty, who was putting on airs and grace, was actually here just to enjoy the air conditioner. Natalie Xavier looked at the Jack and disliked him even more. She sneered and said, Such a pretentious person, and even imitating others to inspect a house. At this time, an employee next door came quickly. He pushed the door open and said with a smile, Thank you. You sent such an important customer to our company. We haven't run into any big business in the past 2 years. Today is a big day. Important customer. The manager face darkened and he hurriedly asked, "What did he buy?" He bought a house worth more than $3 million with a deposit of $1 million. This business should be successful. Thank you. I will treat you to a cup of milk tea later. After that, the employee got on the Mercedes Benz and took Jack to take a look at the house. Really? Bought it? Natalie's face was full of disbelief. Look at Jack, who was sitting in the Mercedes Benz with a smile on his face. Natalie felt very uncomfortable. How could it be possible? He is so poor. How could he possibly afford to buy a house? Smack. Before she could blame herself, the manager raised his hand and slapped her in the face. His eyes were almost bursting out flames. Look at what you have done. If the transaction is successful, the employees who have dealt with him will be given a 5% commission, which would be around $150,000. As for the manager, he would have gotten a 10% commission amounting to $300,000. But now, the manager trembled with anger when he thought of the commission of $3 million gone with the wind. $3 million gone with the wind. He kicked Natalie again and said, "Get out. You are fired. Get out." Natalie was also losing her mind. Ignoring the pain on her body, she quickly got up from the ground and ran outside. Then, throwing herself fully at the Mercedes Benz, she knocked on the window repeatedly and looked at Jack, sobbing, Sir, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I failed to recognize your wealth before, and I'm a snob. Please give me another chance. We have better houses here." Jack shook his head and said, "It's all right. You can save it for the other customers." After that, the Mercedes Benz started up in a hurry. Natalie chased after him all the way and finally sat down on the ground. She looked weakly at the Mercedes Benz getting further and further away. Thud! The manager threw Natalie's personally belonging out of the door and yelled at her, "Get out of here. Don't let me see you again." Jack Cannon was quite satisfied with the house. It had 3 bedrooms, 2 living rooms, and 2 bathrooms. Located in the downtown area, the business district was more prosperous and there was a lot of room for renovation. $3.5 million was paid in a lump sum graciously. The salesman had not seen such a rich man for a long time, and his face was full of admiration and envy. He then took the initiative to send Jack back to university. When he arrived at the gate, Jack nodded and said, "You can drop me off here." The salesman smiled respectfully and said, "All right. Take your time, good sir. The process of transferring the house should be completed tomorrow, and you should be able to move in the day after tomorrow." Okay, Jack nodded and decided to stay at the nearest hotel for the time being for the next 2 days. However, he wanted to know more was what Yvette Jordan would feel if she saw that his house was 3 or 4 times bigger than hers. When they arrived at the gate, Jack first took out $20,000 before strolling into the university. There was not many classes in the afternoon, but Jack had already been absent for a whole class because he had been held up outside for a while. Seeing Jack walking in the classroom, Lara Jean sneered, "Oh, who is this? Isn't this Jack, the beggar of our class? I'm telling you, don't lend your money to such a person. When you lend him money, he acts as though you were his savior and bows to you. However, when you try to get the money back from him, he acts shamelessly like a scam, trying to cheat of your money. Speaking of which, he hasn't paid me back until now. Oh, this guy doesn't have parents. Who knows which bastard he learned these tactics from?" The whole class burst into laughter. Chapter 3. They all knew that Jack Cannon was a poor man as he only seemed to wear 2 different shirts all year round. Although there was no strange smell, the clothes were already so faded and torn that they were simply unsightly. Someone asked, "Lara Jean, how much does he owe you?" $400. "It's only a day's expansion for me, but for him, maybe a month." Putting aside how much he owes me, this kind of person is really disgusting. He doesn't even deserve to lick my shoes. Chuck's expression was indifferent. He looked at Lara and took out $400 from his bag, saying, I will return you the money now. I was really grateful when you were willing to lend me some money when I was starving. But you just slandered me. Let's call it even now. Lara frowned and looked at the $400 in his hand. She asked coldly, Where did you get the money? Did you steal it or rob it? Someone said, Let's look at our pockets to see we are short of money. I earned it myself, Chuck said calmly. You, Lara sneered and said, Why don't you look in the mirror before saying something so outrageous? How can you earn yourself $400 in the morning? Did you sell your body or something? The whole class burst into laughter and said, Ha ha ha, I'm afraid that this guy is not worth so much money, even if he goes to sell his body. Seeing as so many students laughed at him in the classroom, Jack sighed and sat back in his seat. Lara, you should be easier on people. Lara snorted and put the money away. Then tell me what you have done. Answer some of our questions. Jack frowned for a long time and made up an excuse. He said casually, I picked up the money. Oh, lucky. Lara smirked, her malicious tone showing some envy. The other student also asked with jealousy, Hey, how much money did you pick up? Many people were interested and asked one after another, Yes, tell me, how much money did you pick up? Jack was speechless. He stared back at his classmates and continued to lie. 2,000. What? You actually picked up $2,000? Damn it. That's my living expenses for more than a month. All the students were surprised and envied him very much. If they had his luck and picked up $2,000, their lives would be much more comfortable and easier. You suck. Pick up other people's money and claiming that as yourself. Such an embarrassment for our class. When these classmates ridiculed Jack because of jealousy, Queenie Carson was the only one who stood up for him in the class. But Jack didn't care about such gossip and rumors, so he just let them talk about it. After class, Jack went to Yevette Jordan's staff room, because there was no class in the afternoon. Yevette was listening to music in the staff room. When she saw Jack, her expression soared. What are you doing here? Didn't I tell you that you were not allowed to look for me in between classes? Jack said with a worried smile, I just want to tell you that I am going to move out today. You want to move out? Are you kidding? Yevette sneered. Since young she had grown up with Jack, knowing him like the back of her hand. How could he move out? Does he want to sleep on the streets? But he had been timid since he was a child, even insisting to use her as his body pillow when sleeping. If it weren't for the death of his grandfather, God knows how much longer she would have to be hugged by him to sleep. Such a person sleeping on the street, he wouldn't dare to do that even if he had 10 times the courage. I'm not joking with you. I will move out today, Jack said seriously. Well, I would like to see how long you can. Don't come back begging to me like a dog. I won't. After Jack finished speaking, he turned round and left the office. Yevette stared at his living figure thoughtfully. In the past, no matter how much she scolded him, he would not dare to talk back. She don't know what happened to him today. All of a sudden her phone rang. After picking up the phone, she quickly changed her tone and answered. Hello, Director Chester. What happened for you to suddenly call me up this late? A middle-aged man's voice could be heard from the other end of the phone. Yevette, I heard that your trading company business is not good recently. Do you want me to introduce some business to you? Yevette's heart was filled with joy. Her recent business is the trading company could be said to be very poor. It was already been difficult for her to make any progress. If she did not show any improvement again, she was afraid that she would have to close the company in half a year. She had already lost more than $100,000 in the past 2 months. It was also because of that she was recently venting all her anger on Jack. After hearing Director Chester's business proposal, a smile appeared on her face. Yes, thank you for taking care of me, Director Chester. Well, room number 1218 is in the Triumph Hotel tonight. Come over. A hotel? Yevette was a little scared. Director Chester, why don't treat you a five-star hotel dinner in the urban area? A hotel? What's wrong? You don't even give me face. No, no, it's just a hotel. Instantly, a steeled voice was heard from the phone. Forget it. If you don't come, this business is given by my friend's company as his employees need to be trained. You should not know how much money you can make from a big company with 50 to 60 people. If you don't come, I won't force you. Yevette was very conflicted. She didn't want to go, but she didn't want to waste his opportunity either. Just when she had wanted to negotiate, he hung up all of a sudden. If I don't take the deal, I'm afraid that I'm going to bankrupt. She decided to take the risk. After leaving school, she drove home, planning to simply tidy up and change her clothes. However, when she just arrived at the door of the house, she saw Chuck coming out of the house with a suitcase. The two of them looked at each other. Chuck said, "Wifi." As soon as he spoke, Yevette interrupted him with disgust. "Don't call me like that, Yevette. No matter what, you have been taking care of me for almost a year after grandfather's death. If you..." Yevette sneezed and said, "What's wrong? Do you regret it? Do you want me to give you a chance?" Yevette sneered impatiently. "No, I mean if you have any difficulties in the future, you can tell me." Chuck nodded before walking past Yevette. After all, he and Yevette had been sleeping in the same bed for so long. He still had some feeling for her in his heart. Yevette was also absent-minded for a moment. She didn't expect that this man, whom she looked down upon the most, would say such comforting words today. It was as though in a trance she had found someone to rely upon. But then she smiled coolly and said, "Tell you. What good would it bring me to tell you? Can you give me money or bring me some customers? You can't give me anything, and you can't even afford a meal, yet you want me to tell you." Chuck shrugged. He still had more than $1 million in his hand. Even if it was not enough, he still had his mother. The money would be transferred to his account with just a phone call. "If you need money, I can give it to you." Yevette feebly waved her hand and sneered. "You would better keep the money for yourself to buy instant noodles." Chuck did not defend himself. He left with his suitcase. Chuck walked with his suitcase for a while. After inquiring about the hotels nearby, he got on a taxi and went to the Triumph Hotel. The magnificent buildings, the glorious decorations, and the luxurious European interiors shocked him to his core. This was the busiest hotel in the city, which cheapest standard hotel rooms cost at least $800. In the past, Chuck did not dare to think that he could spend in such a place, but now it was different.